Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey. All right. Welcome everyone to All Devs 38. Yeah, this is the new All Devs format. We're going to start now and see if other people join. Although I don't expect we'll be very numerous today because of the holidays. Um, Matthew, are you okay with taking notes today? Um,
Yep,
cool.
sure.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, so this is a new all devs format. It's a test run for the format that was discussed on the previous all dev. And basically now you can, I mean, you guys, I mean, everybody on the call has posted updates on the forum thread. So now like updates are written and available on the forum. I think that a good practice would be to quickly go over them. I mean, the updates before joining the all devs, so everyone is on the same page and kind of has the yeah, is up to date. Um, but other than that, now that we have updates taken care of already, um, we can jump straight to topics. Um, it's from the forum post that we've had this week. Um, there was only one proposed topic, which came from Open Work Labs. But I don't know if John, and also given your connection issues, you'd be eager to discuss it, or if you.
I think my connection's better now. I don't know what happened. Yeah.
Yep, yep, yeah. So I mean, we hear you well.
Cool. Yeah. Are you asking to go through that stuff now or
Yeah.
later on?
So yeah. Now, like, we're going to jump straight into topics. So if you feel like, I think that the purpose of this, I mean, of your topic is to answer questions and go through like the work that has been done for Open Work Labs, given that Open Work Labs will stopped collaborating with Otar in 2020.
Yeah, I think that's a great use. I mean, at least judging from the people who are here now, I think that would be a good use of time. Yeah, I'm down to do that. I don't know if you wanted to start with like questions or me just like sharing my screen and going through the repos and what we've done. Um, yeah, what would people like to see? I guess like Arthur, Yalda, Brett. This is probably mostly related to what would be the most helpful for you. So yeah, you let me know how you want to do this.
Guys, any preference?
Yeah, I think going through the repos might be just a good idea, just so we have an idea of what's going on.
Yeah, cool. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, I think that'd be useful.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. How do I do that here? Bottom right, share, view, share a YouTube video. How do you share screen again in here?
Should be the bottom left. I think.
Yeah.
Oh, bottom left. There we go. Okay. Okay, let's see. Can you all see this?
No.
Can't see my screen right now?
No.
Now? Anything? No? Hang on. I don't know what's happening here. Might need to like change my settings. Hang on. Sorry about this.
No worries. We have time.
Can you see it now? Any
Nope.
Oh, there we go. Here we go. Okay, I have to quit and then come back in. So give me
Okay,
2
cool.
seconds.
Yeah, of course.
Hopefully this should work now. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, I guess we should. So we could start with Quasar. This is like the repository that we've been working on for a while, and the documentation is like there's a lot here. So there's a bunch of videos that or 3 videos actually, for like how this is all working. So like here is a video code review that you could watch, just like that takes you through the code. I'll just do this like quicker, I guess, for the all devs. There's also videos of if you go into the docs and like usage with Aragon, there's 2 videos in here of like how we integrated with Aragon JS and also how we integrated with the client. So essentially, just to make sure we're all on the same page, Quasar is a server, like an API server that just wraps an IPFS node and manages pinning permissions for that node based on pin hash events in smart contracts. And so I'm trying to think of like the best place to start that's not like too deep, but still like gives you a good understanding of what's going on, I guess. Let's see, where's a good place to start? So maybe a good place to start is how do you actually go about pinning a file? What's happening when this is going on? So there's a concept called optimistic pinning. Maybe I'll bring up a kind of a picture. Oh, here, this is a good place to start. So essentially, this is Quasar, the wrapper around IPFS. And Quasar is associated with one storage registry contract, which you see here on the top left, which essentially just has pointers to storage contracts, which emit pin hash events. So if we were to look, hang on, I'll pull up the code here. if we were going to look just briefly at like the interface for these types of contracts, this is like what a storage contract interface looks like. It just fires a pin hash event. And this is what a storage registry contract looks like. It just fires like a register event and an unregister event. So anytime that you want, let's say you have a new storage contract that you want to listen to, you would fire that contract address in this register, in this storage registry, and Quasar will pick it up and start listening for events. There's an alternative mechanism for registering smart contract. Or first of all, does anyone have any questions with that? That's like kind of just the overarching pattern of like the moving pieces. And then there's optimistic pinning, which comes in a little bit later, and I'll explain that in more depth too. But so far, does that make sense? Like the different components here? I'll take silence as a yes, but feel free to like butt in at any point when, or if or when you have questions. So there is an alternative mechanism to registering storage contracts with Quasar, which is just through like an HTTP endpoint. And that's how we're using it within Aragon JS and within the client, because we don't want essentially every Aragon organization to have to like have this app installed and fire these register events for every new contract. It would really take away from the UX. Although this is kind of like a permissionless way. Again, if you wanted to, you could use one of these storage registry contracts and wrap it in like Aragon auth, essentially, so that only token holders can add new storage contracts to listen to, and so on. But for now, we have these routes, and one of them is post to the storage contracts, and this essentially just creates a new storage contract to listen to. So in the Aragon JS and the Aragon client integration, we end up using this post route. And I can show you kind of like how that goes down. So let's see, let me pull up the projects app real quick. So here's the projects app, or this is address books. Here's the projects app. And essentially all you need to do to mark a storage app is in the ARAP JSON, just add this like storage key is true. And then the wrapper, when it loads all the apps, if it gets a new app that's marked as a storage contract, it will go ahead and call this endpoint to make sure that Quasar is listening to, in this case, it would be the projects app. And that's how then Quasar becomes aware of all of these contracts that might be emitting pin hash events, that then Quasar should go and make sure that data is pinned on the IPFS node that it's associated with. So far, so good. Any questions?
The only comment I would make here is it's a little bit flaky of a security model, but we would probably want to whitelist like app names or app IDs instead of just letting the storage contract be true. But I think the general gist is good. Right.
You can, right now these routes they have no auth essentially. You could implement basic auth, JWT auth, whitelisting, contract addresses auth, like really any other kind of auth that makes sense. For now, there is no security essentially on this. So, and that was one thing that is a little bit difficult, but so one of the challenges in this is that we're trying to use Quasar in like two different ways almost. One is for the Aragon Association, in the sense that the Aragon Association should be able to bootstrap an organization's data store. I probably should have taken a step back in the sense that like one of the assumptions around making all of this infrastructure is that it's nice for an organization to have its own data store where we know that data is going to be pinned. And exposing Aragon JS methods to application developers that then allow the applications to go ahead and pin data to the organization's data store. And this could be a revenue model for the Aragon Association in the sense that like, hey, we're going to give each new organization some free amount of storage space. And after that, they can either pay as a subscription to the Aragon Association, or they could self-host. And so if they were to self-host their own data store, it might make more sense to use that storage registry contract because it's a completely different use case than Aragon registering every storage app for every organization that starts. So it is a little bit of a different use case. And I think in the self-hosting use case, using that storage registry contract provides a little bit more like a more sensible security model there than the one that's implemented for the Aragon Association at the start. Yeah, but I totally agree. So what else? What's the next best thing to show? Oh, optimistic pinning. So essentially there comes a point in time where I think this is the diagram here. There's certain times where events take a long time to actually get fired or heard by Quasar on the network. And this poses a problem with like some timing issues. Let's say the project's app fires a pin hash event with some CID, and before that gets heard or like actually confirmed in the network, the client app wants to request that same CID from the storage layer or from Quasar. Obviously, at this point in time, Quasar hasn't heard of the pin hash event yet. And so we essentially need a way to tell Quasar, like, hey, can you hold on to this CID for a little bit until you hear of the pin hash event? And Quasar does that. And that's what's called optimistic pinning, where you give Quasar some data, it pins it for some predetermined amount of time. And when it hears a pin hash event, it goes ahead and quote unquote, like confirms that hash is valid. And if it hasn't heard of a pin hash event in a certain predetermined amount of time, it will go ahead and actually unpin and get rid of the data that was optimistically pinned. This is another area where there could be like potential security issues with DOSing or storing like large amounts of files for short amounts of time. But in order to sort of combat that, we limit the size of each request, and we also we rate limit based on some rate limiting module that we use. Again, there's definitely much better ways around that, but it seemed like it wasn't. There's a lot of and this goes back to sort of why the decision was made for us to kind of step away from this work for a while, because there's a lot of things that could be done, but it's not obvious in which order they should be done or when they're going to become a problem. So it seems like a better idea to like get feedback on these things, maybe put them into some experimental features like we're finishing up now, and see what the real problems are, or maybe there's some that we just didn't think about beforehand too. And we also will probably learn the best way to handle them by having them out in the wild for a little bit too. So how do we get around optimistic pinning? This is a little bit of a more intense diagram. But essentially the first step that happens is the client app will call one of these two endpoints. This is actually outdated. This is no longer files add, but just add and dag put. And these are meant to mirror the IPFS API. So I'll change this diagram. And what happens when the client app says, hey, go ahead and pin this data optimistically, Quasar will put that into the storage layer and store a reference of that data in a database. And then upon hearing of the pin hash event, it confirms the data in the database, and it won't remove any pin data from the storage layer. Whereas like we have this pin checking microservice that is just constantly looking at the database to see which confirmed or which pins are not confirmed and removing them if they've been in there for too long. So far, so good. Anything not making sense? I know this is like a lot probably to hear, although people are probably somewhat familiar with certain parts. Cool. So we went ahead and integrated this with like the rest of Aragon in two different ways with two different approaches, so that like Brett or Arthur or anyone else who wants to bring this in could evaluate the two different integration strategies. So one of them is in the client. Let's take a look at that. And the way that this one is working is essentially so the purpose of this at first was to enable organization settings as a way to kind of showcase what Quasar could do. So the way that we do that is we have the DAO install a storage app that fits the interfaces that I showed you before. So it just has to fire a pin hash event. And so in this case, let's see, where does this happen? There is context. Here we go. Essentially, when the DAO loads, we have this pretty much just an IPFS storage context wrapper that sits really high up in the React render tree and senses if a storage app is installed by default in the DAO. And if it is, it will essentially allow the organization to be able to store different information about the DAO, like metadata. So organization settings, an organization logo, stuff like that, within this storage contract. And this, we basically have one big use effect hook that goes through, it asks the kernel for a default storage app. It attempts to find that storage app's proxy address, and it then creates a callable object out of the storage app's ABI, and then it tells Quasar, this is, firing that, hey, go ahead and make sure the storage app is being listened to, and then we fire these like Redux-esque actions that allow the rest of the Aragon client UI to know what the state of this storage app is, and if we have a connection with Quasar and the IPFS nodes there. And there's another kind of like maybe a little weird pattern that we use, which is to avoid using any IPFS dependencies in this repo, which are really heavy. And they're found in this storage directory, which has these like Quasar class methods. One of them is create IPFS provider, which essentially just adds some basic IPFS methods to handle and expose to the rest of the client. So far, so good. I mean, I don't know. Is this too deep? Is this a waste of people's time right now?
I think it's useful. It just depends on how much more, I guess, there is that we want to get to.
Yeah. Why don't I jump over then just to the Aragon JS stuff, because this is, I think the video that I record on this goes into a good amount of depth on what's happening, and it gives live demos of this stuff working and shows how to like use it. Essentially, there's a hook that we made that I'll just show you. So it exposes a lot of these different pieces of information about the storage app. So you can get information from the org data store, set it, and those are like JavaScript objects, and these are actual files, and then some stateful variables, and then this object that looks a lot like IPFS. And you can really just use those throughout the client. And if you wanted to build an Aragon JS integration using this work, I imagined it working a lot like, for example, signing messages or transactions, where there's an observable that's held in the wrapper, and the client is subscribed to that observable. And anytime there's some data that gets added to that observable, the client will go ahead and like set that information into the org data store and then return some information to the wrapper, which then gets returned to the API. In the next way that we integrated this, all the operations that happen with IPFS and Quasar are actually happening in the wrapper and not the client. So that's the two different strategies that I was talking about there. And I can just show you really quickly. There's this data store method. Oops, I'm in the wrong branch. And essentially it looks a lot like the Web3 API endpoint. And if we take a peek into the wrapper, this gets handled by the data store class, which essentially has these methods, the same ones that you saw in the client, like adding a file, catting the file, and adding and getting DAGs. And so when the client sends a request, this data store class will handle it. And yeah, that's like pretty much the work that we did on Quasar. There's more work for like 3-box identity resolution. There's work for integrating profiles and contextual discussions. But I think that stuff is probably easier to just have people look at the code rather than me go through it.
So I have two questions based on what you were saying. The first one, for the Quasar integration into the front end, it seems like this is something that should maybe live in Quasar, like it should expose a package on NPM or something like that, so that it can just take in the Quasar URL and just expose the API rather than us bundling it inside, or the code at least, inside the client or the wrapper.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah. Okay. The other one was about profiles. I was just wondering if you had more work done on that compared to before, if that's just something that has still stayed where it was.
So it's the profile work. So there's like some bugs with the super latest 3-box package, like 1.15. Profiles is updated to like 1.11, so it's up there. And there's a PR open for, let's see. So this is kind of a big PR that takes the profiles, upgrades to like the latest 3-box, and also upgrades all the UI components to the latest Aragon UI. But there are bugs because of that 3-box issue. And so once they fix that, this should work. But it like I'm holding off on pulling anything in because of that. So that's the latest on this. And then there's also, like I said, in the experimental OE branch of, or there's actually a 3-box, let's see. There's a 3-box identity resolution branch on the Aragon JS package that, does 3-box identity resolution. So yeah, and there are some tests there. The reason that I didn't submit a PR with this is because, again, there were 3-box issues that were causing these tests to fail. So those may be fixed in 3-box, but it could also be related to the latest bugs that they have. But this stuff is all like pretty much ready to go. And this 3-box identity resolution is working quite well with the experimental OE stuff that we've put together.
Nice.
Any other cues? guess I'll stop sharing.
Cool. Thanks a lot, John, for the screen sharing and walkthrough. Very cool. It's nice because it's recorded. I think that Matthew or me can post that into the All Devs forum thread, so everyone can check this out and also check the repo.
Sweet. Yeah, there's also like really in-depth video walkthroughs and documentation within the repo as well that explains like all of that, probably much better than I just did before too.
Awesome. Sounds great. Perfect. Cool. Do you guys want to chat about anything else that we don't have on the topics list? Yeah. If not, I think we'll end with John's presentation. It was really cool. I personally like to have some deeper content on the All Devs, which is really nice. Let's see after the break how this new format evolves and yeah, if we like it. And yeah, so have a great Christmas break, everyone. And see you in 2 weeks on All Devs.
Everyone, thanks for the time. This is going to be my last All Devs. So it was great working with you, and good luck. I'll be around though. Like I'm on Keybase. If you Aragon chat me, I'll be around.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
You'll be missed.
I miss all of you too.
All right.
Talk to everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.